Okay. Dennis and Casper here with Submission Radio post-fight UFC 230, brought to you by Musashi at Madison Square Garden, the sacred grounds, Luke, where we have, of course, Luke Thomas talking about some of the craziness here today. Before we get into the fights, Luke, let's talk about whether or not this card was salvaged by Daniel Cormier and Derek Lewis. We heard there were some good statistics after the fight. The commercial sales or buys were through the roof. But when it comes to pay-per-view buys, do you believe that this event will have a solid result?
I think, yeah, well, the question was it salvaged? I think the answer is pretty clearly yes. First of all, Cormier did an absolute metric ton of promotion for this. He was everywhere. If you plugged his name into YouTube or even just the search engine, every media outlet seemingly out there had all kinds of different interviews with him, including...
Except Submission Radio.
Look.
The biggest one of them all.
You know what?
It was in some show called the MMA Hour, but I'm not sure what he was doing on there.
I'm sure it was an unintentional oversight. But the point being was he was on a bunch of non-MMA media stuff as well. And so, you know, you look at the ticket sales, they ended up being good enough, I think. The media ended up being good enough. Even losing Diaz, the commercial sales, as you mentioned, probably were good or even better. So, like, people always think you can turn water into wine. You cannot do that. Like, did they lose out on what it could have been in its upper bound limit? Pretty clearly. But were they able to make something useful here? Did it end up being something more than just an average run-of-the-mill card? I think the answer is pretty clearly yes.
We'll obviously talk about the fight in a second, Daniel Cormier versus Derek Lewis, but just sort of on Cormier, what do you think, where do you think he lies in terms of his stock and I guess his connection with the fans and his popularity, because he's always sort of had a bit of an up and down run with the fans. It seems like as soon as Jon Jones enters the equation in any way, people start booing Daniel Cormier a little bit. Obviously, he's faced fan favorites in the past, guys like Anderson Silva, Derek Lewis, this time Dan Henderson, and a lot of times those guys sort of get more love than Daniel Cormier as people who sort of had the privilege to interview him for the first time this coming week, or this past week. He's got this weird way of connecting with everybody, sort of looking into your soul and really working the room. But where do you think he sort of stays with the fans?
Well, I didn't know you were having romantic moments with him.
Well, you do now.
Via the eyes.
And this is in front of a live televised studio audience, in case you guys can't hear the laughing track in the back.
This is the weirdest video I've ever cut. I want you both to know that. And I've cut some weird ones. The answer to the question about Cormier, I think, is I'm serious about this. I think every time he gets up there and does another press event, he wins over more people. I think every time he does that, he's got both belts. It just seems to carry this kind of weight that is universally, it just blocks out not all of the hate necessarily, but it just makes it seem so petty and so distant. So you heard a couple boos. I think that's inevitable. I think, you know, at the height of the booing when he got, however long ago that was, he is so far from that now. So yes, are there some remnants of it? Yes, Jon Jones coming back to that provoke more of this, I think, to an extent. But I believe every time he goes through one of these cycles, it makes him look better and bigger and more important and more respected. And certainly the media has a high opinion of him, and I think that carries down as well.
And just to redeem myself a little bit, Luke, what the point I was trying to make was...
joking. I'm not actually being serious.
Still have to redeem myself. Okay. The point is, for those who don't know, have first-hand experience, he's the kind of guy that if you're in a room with him, you just can't help but fall in love with him. Right. That's what I'm trying to say.
You really cleared that one up, Casper.
I will say
he's
this.
a very likable guy.
The hole is getting deeper here at the Submission Radio post-fight show.
I will say this while the peanut gallery throws things at you. Very few fighters know most of the MMA media's names. And I don't think he knows all of them, but I think he knows a lot of them. He can often respond to them and knows their outlets. And he kind of has a sense of the ecosystem, which tells you like the detail he spends and the care he spends and like his understanding of the medium. It's these small details. This is what I'm talking about. Over time, they add up to make people just, they don't have a choice, but if they don't like him, they certainly have to respect him.
Before we move off the fight, just quickly, and by the way, I find him attractive as well. Before we move off the fight, you two
need help. These flights from Australia
are
ruining
It's 3 in the morning here. I'm pretty sure it's 3 days ahead of time in Australia, and I don't know what's going on over there. But let's just quickly talk about his future. Looks like he's going to be fighting Brock Lesnar next, and that could be it. Do you think he needs to fight Jon Jones before he calls it quits? Is this something that he needs for his legacy, in your opinion?
No. I would love to see it. I really would. I kind of thought we all were going to. I think we talked about this a little bit last time I saw you guys in Vegas, and I was like, man, I can't wait for a third one. It's inevitable, like the most crucial of the 3 meetings almost in some ways. But he seems to have pivoted, and interestingly, Jones, they're squabbling, but both guys seem to have pivoted away from each other in opposite directions. But it means that they're not thinking alike, and so I guess not. Like, you know, dude, you're up here with 2 UFC belts, and you're the first guy to defend a title in 2 different weight classes, and you're making a shitload of money, and you got these other opportunities coming. why on earth would you feel like you need to validate somebody's concern about your legacy? You don't need to do anything. Would it be nice? Of course. Would it matter if he won? It would be incredibly substantial. But I think he's just decided, I want to have a life independent of a heated rival. I think that seems like a very human request, and it's a doable one. And this is the best way to go about doing it. If you want to dock him, but he's on a pretty important path.
And just quickly, just to clear up, he said he's got a massive job coming up in the future, one of the highest paying jobs that he's going to have. He's not replacing Luke Thomas on the MMA Hour, just to confirm right now.
No, not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure if he got the job offer, I'd get kicked off immediately, and they would happily sign him. And you know what? I wouldn't even blame him.
Well, obviously the MMA wouldn't be the same without you, but what did you think of the actual fight itself? You know, it wasn't really anything too surprising. Any major takeaways about how it all played out?
I mean, it kind of was what we thought it was probably going to be. The wrestling of Daniel Cormier is just incredible. He talked about the versatility of it, from the snap down with the ankle pick to the running of the pipe to the treetop to all the stuff he was doing. It's just remarkable. He makes. And like when he kicked out the post leg, remember that on Lewis? These guys, he makes these huge men go flying through the air. It's crazy how talented he is. So that was a strong reminder of it. The one thing I thought was interesting, I mentioned this on the MMA Fighting post-fight show, which was Derek Lewis the whole week. You know, you guys were in that scrum, and he was like, "Oh, I don't care about being the best fighter, and I just want to do right by my family." And I believe him, that's true. But man, he seemed genuinely hurt at how this all turned out, which you can also understand. But I'm not saying he's not telling the truth when he talks about what most is important to him, but I am saying that competitor in him is also still pretty real.
Do you believe he comes back stronger from this Derek Lewis, or do you believe we see a lot of guys go up, we see a lot of guys go down, where they sort of get to this fork in the road?
I mean, look, he kind of got here being sort of, I don't mean just from a personality who he is, but from a skill set. People know who he is. He knows who he is. That didn't really change a whole lot. He just fought a guy who's incredible. He fought a guy who was literally historically one of the best ever. Okay, it didn't go your way. So what? If he gets another tough matchup, we'll see how that goes. Maybe if he gets a Stipe, that is also a problematic matchup. But any other heavyweight, he's going to be out there. He's going to be very competitive. I really believe that.
I want to talk about the co-main event. Before we sing praises for Jacare, obviously Chris Weidman finds himself at a bit of an interesting point in his career. He's had some really big key losses in the middleweight division. It's hard to see him in that title picture anytime sort of in the immediate future. People are wondering, is it maybe time for him to go to light heavyweight? Do you think there is sort of that caveat that, look, he was coming off a very long layoff and a very serious injury to his hand? What do you think should be next for Chris Weidman?
That is a tough one. 34 years old, lost 4 of your last 5. That's not an easy choice or roadmap to figure out at all. I would at least kick the tires on light heavyweight. I don't know that a full, complete abandonment of middleweight is necessarily a good idea, but maybe he can get some interesting fights at light heavyweight. You got guys like Cannoneer coming down from light heavyweight. He was, I won't say an also-ran, but somewhat unremarkable in his campaign there. And then he beats David Branch in his first fight and stops him, by the way. Like, you just never know what kind of a change will get you, either from a division or to an organization. It can just do a lot to reinvigorate you and make things different. And so I would at least entertain that idea, because on the path he's on, you just don't see a way forward absent either some kind of miraculous turnaround or some kind of Herculean growth period that I also don't find quite likely.
Well, I mentioned Adesanya to Jacare at the post-fight press conference. He almost took that as an insult. He believed he is next for the title. So give us your thoughts. What should be next for him, and what did you think of the Jacare that we saw today at Madison Square Garden?
I know he thinks that it's next for the title, which I respect. Yeah. You would expect him to. Like, oh, look at the great wins I've put together. I think 2 wins in a row he's got now. And he thought today was his best one, right? So that's kind of interesting. You lost to both guys in the title fight, and the Gastelum one I know is close, but the Whitaker one wasn't. And so if Whitaker wins, it's like, I don't really know what you do with that. I like the Israel Adesanya fight for him. It's another big test. They could put that in a lot of different and interesting places, and they could put it on a big card. They could put it internationally. I thought, in terms of how the fight, I thought he was having a lot of trouble with the boxing range and the jab. Everything was working behind that jab for Weidman. He was so good in that first round, but then he decided, I got to fight anywhere but that range. So he was diving into him, pulling his head down in the clinch, fighting him at kickboxing range. He was having a lot more success. And, this dude bit down on the mouthpiece and just came forward. His bearing, like, what's the famous saying, right? Fatigue makes cowards of men. A lot of people get tired, and your brain begins to tell you to quit. he gets tired like everybody else. He just doesn't make the choice to stop the activity. He keeps his bearing. He keeps his focus. He's really an incredible competitor.
You got to sort of feel bad for Jacare in this situation because I feel like for the longest time in his UFC run, he's that guy who's always one win away from a title shot. And it just seems like that one win never really comes, and then he's sort of back to square one, and now he's in another good streak. But you mentioned Israel Adesanya before. What do you think about this performance? I mean, he is proving people, any potential doubters, wrong every time. This is a huge statement. Obviously, his last few fights have been really impressive, but now he gets a finish in the first round. What did you think of this one?
I was blown away. I was truly blown. This is the fight I had circled on the whole card. As like that's the one to watch, dude. He is. I don't know if he's the heir to Conor McGregor. He's still got a lot to prove, and he's very much different than that. But what I mean is, there's always been these peaks with, like, John Jones had his issues, but he was a star for a while, and then Rousey actually got, I think, a little more popular before Conor, and then so Conor was next. Again, we'll see what happens with him, but it just kind of feels like he's the next one to just take over this whole thing. He's so utterly impressive in virtually every way. He is good at media. He is smart. He is incredible to watch. Deadly finishing skills and miraculous improvement fight over fight. He does the hard labor. He does all the media talk. Like, tell me what he's bad at. I can't figure that out. Now, is he all the way arrived? No. There's still some of that needs to be worked out. But I was saying this, like, you get a St. Pierre, and they had these long title runs, and those are historic and incredible. Same with John Jones, absent all the issues, but for a while there, right? But to me, most of the time, like, look at Khabib, he got the title. Who knows what he's going to do with this? And Conor got the title, and it kind of just, he got stripped of them both. And to me, the most exciting time is when they're on that way up. When he was blowing through, in the case of Conor, the Poiriers, and he was blowing through the Aldos. This is what Adesanya's on right now. Right now, every time he just makes you reimagine what's possible. It's like, oh my God, how is he doing this? It's because he's incredibly special.
It's interesting. He's got a pay-per-view market behind him in New Zealand and Australia. And his gym, City Kickboxing in Auckland, is absolutely killing it right now. Dan Hooker, they're doing something special over there.
They really are.
His coach, Eugene, they're sort of proving you don't need to go to an AKA or an American top team to elevate your skills. And there's a few guys in the local scene over there, like Robert Whitaker, who've been able to do that. So just a big shout out to City Kickboxing, because I know this is another proud moment for them. You mentioned Jacare possibly for him next, but there's other names like Luke Rockhold, other names like Anderson Silva. Is there anyone else that sort of piques your interest in what could be possibly next for Israel Adesanya? And do you want to see him back soon? Because, I mean, this is a guy that just got on the scene at UFC Perth. Wasn't even that long ago. He looks like he wants to take a bit of a break and sort of come back a little bit later than people would like him to come back.
I would like to see him take a break. I think because he needs it. 4 fights this year. Didn't get the stoppage in the Tavares fight, right? So he lacks one there. But he's on the short list for Fighter of the Year. Yeah, probably needs some time off. Although it's funny, I'll talk to a bunch of guys. I talked to Poirier after the Alvarez win. He's like, I'm definitely going to take some time off, right? I'm done. I'm going to get back into gi. I'm just going to be a martial artist. 2 weeks later, I'm fighting Nate Diaz. And that all fell through. But the point is, he was ready to go through with it, So if something big comes his way, he'll probably take it and he'll probably be ready. Absent that, I do think he's earned some time off. And it's more than earning it. It's like, this is a guy who knows himself. And he knows how to calibrate when to press and when to brake, when to hit the gas and when to hit the brake. He's ready to hit the brake. I think we should listen to him.
And him and Dan Hooker had a funny back and forth where Dan Hooker was saying, fighters that get paid to be the backup and just make weight, you're not a fighter, you're a swimsuit model. And Israel said to us, you know what, I love that. If I'm going to get paid to be the backup, it's a great opportunity. So if that opportunity comes in February for Robert Whitaker, Kelvin Gastelum, it's hard to imagine that he wouldn't take it. As we let you go, Luke, any other standout moments from the card, any other fights that sort of struck you in this one?
Real quickly, you asked about the Anderson Silva one, too. I have no interest in seeing that whatsoever.
Well, it doesn't look like he's
not
got any
anymore,
interest in really doing it either.
Yeah, good. It does nothing for me. And the Luke Rockhold one I would like to see, but I guess Dana doesn't want to see it, so we'll see what happens with that. But that would be one I want to see. Yes, Julio Arce and Shaman Moraes in the bloodiest fight. Not ever. Yeah. People like us the bloodiest fight ever. No, it's not. The bloodiest fight ever is probably, at least in UFC, Jay Huron and Jonathan Goulet. Yeah. A couple of the Joe Stevenson fights were really bad. There's been some other ones that were like really bloody, but this was up there. This was certainly an interesting one. So just to be covered in your own blood and to be like blithely unconcerned by it is such a ridiculous switch that some of these guys can flip. It's amazing, right? So that one, Sijara Eubanks getting a nice win. I know she is a bit of a hated person right now, but that's a good thing to be in certain cases in this game.
She's very likable. That post-fight interview she gave, really good.
She is actually, as a person, she actually is quite likable. I'm just saying with the fans, you can always have a weird relationship. And that's currently the space she finds herself in. It was, you know what? It was sad to see Jason Knight get a 4th loss in a row. Yeah. I do think a lot of his ability, but I don't know if he just hasn't had a chance to really fully commit to MMA. And he's fighting really tough guys who are really good, athletic, strong wrestle scramblers. It just gives him some problems. But also, I have to mention, of course, Jared Cannoneer. Yeah. Last thing I'll say about Jared Cannoneer, I'm telling you, man, find a weight class you can be in that you can stay at without too much issue. He mentioned that it was no problem for the cut because he was just fighting bloated, basically. Find that right space, and when the phone rings, answer it, because when you do, you are going to be in a great spot to jump the queue. He just beat the number 7 guy in the world on his first fight in the weight class. So to the point about the weight class with Weidman, you can do that, and then also like just be ready. The best way to get through the UFC is not to just fight every guy in front of you, because they're all going to say no. The guy who's going to say yes is the one who's on short notice, who has no choice, and now you get to fight all the ranked guys that way.
It feels like the secret to being a weight is keeping your wife happy and eating what she tells you to eat. He mentioned there's some salads that he wasn't too happy about, but I don't think he's going to give her any guff, Luke. I think there's no guff going her way if she cooks the wrong thing. He's eating what he's told, and I think that's one of the special things about Cannoneer that no other fighters can really use as their advantage. But anyway, as we wrap up here...
That's a weird way to wrap. That's a super weird way to wrap.
It's all about the guff. It's all about the guff here in Madison Square Garden, UFC 230. Guys, as we wrap up, this has been an amazing time for us just being here. The place is sacred. So many great fights, so many great moments. This has been one of them. He is Luke Thomas. Check him out and all his amazing projects. Of course, MMA Hour, The Luke Thomas Show. So much great stuff. And we are Submission Radio. It is early in the morning. We are tired. Thanks for watching.